All right, we are live. We'll get started. My name is John Davis. I'm project supervisor for MarineDebris.Info, the online discussion forum for ocean litter research, management, and activism. For more information, go to MarineDebris.Info, which is where you may already, in fact, be watching this event. The idea for this panel discussion grew out of a conversation I had several weeks ago with some marine debris researchers, where we remarked on the chasm that seems to exist in our world. The general public hears about ocean plastics and the garbage patches, and their reaction is to want to clean up the mess that we've made. Whereas in the research and NGO sectors, I think it's safe to say that the majority of folks feel cleanup is a distraction at best from other necessary efforts to reduce ocean plastics, like using less plastic in general and having better waste management. The chasm may only be growing wider. Public awareness of ocean plastics is increasing, but so is scientific awareness of some of the challenges that would be involved with doing cleanup effectively. So this panel discussion is intended to see if we can bridge some of that chasm and explore the utility and feasibility of ocean cleanup to the extent that each of us feels it is feasible. We have three experts on the panel. We have Marcus Eriksen, co-founder and research director of the Gyres Institute, which conducts research worldwide on ocean plastic pollution. We have Boyan Slat, the 19-year-old founder and president of the Ocean Cleanup, a project to develop the world's first feasible method of collecting ocean plastics on a grand scale. And we have Nick Mallos, director of the Trash-Free Seas program at Ocean Conservancy, which, among other initiatives, conducts the annual International Coastal Cleanup. So welcome to the three of you.
Thank you.
We'll start with an opening statement from each panelist lasting no longer than 3 minutes each. And first up is Marcus Eriksen.
All right, 3 minutes. You said 5 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, did I say 3? I'm sorry, 5 minutes.
Let me show I want to share my screen real quick. I got a few photographs to share. Well, first I want to thank John for creating this panel, and Nick and Boyan. I know you guys both professionally and personally, so I'm glad we're having this conversation. So I want to show you a few slides of sort of my experience professionally and personally also on this issue, and what I think some of the solutions are, and what I think about gyre cleanup. So I just came back just last month. Came back a few days ago, actually, from sailing from Bermuda to Iceland. We did 2,400 miles with a really awesome crew, and we collected 31 surface net tows. Now, what I can tell you is that every one of our trawls had little bits of microplastic, some more than others. But total, I could hold all that plastic we collected in all 31 trawls in my two cupped hands. But the point is that across the ocean surface, we are finding microplastics they're not as abundant as we expected, but they really are everywhere. Now I'm taking this data, and we're on the verge of publishing a paper. It's the first estimate of plastic pollution worldwide, both the macro stuff, the meso, and the microplastics as well. So we took all of our data from myself and 8 other colleagues, pulled it all together, and we estimate there's about 250,000 tons of plastic waste from 5.25 trillion particles or greater. Now we took all that data and we separated that into 4 size ranges: the macro, the meso, and then 2 microplastic size ranges. The stuff as big as a grain of rice and the stuff as big as salt and pepper flakes. I'm going to show you those 4 maps. And look at the top 2 maps here. This is important. Is that on the top right side, those are the rice grain size fragments. The top left are the salt and pepper size fragments. And these are maps of global distribution of those particles by count. We find that the salt and pepper size fragments are less abundant on the sea surface than the larger microplastic fragments. And
Marcus,
combined,
I'm not seeing. Oh,
yeah, we're not seeing the map.
Really? Oh, I can see it. I'm not sure what to do then.
On the left side of your screen, if you click on the PowerPoint slide that you want us to be looking at, that might do it.
Huh. Yeah, I'm not sure why it's not showing up here. Let me try again this way. How about now?
Yep, we're seeing the one that says unnecessary to chase.
Microplastics. Okay, let me show this screen then. So my point is that the microplastic fragments, we are not finding as much on the surface, roughly 100 times less than we expected. So if you're chasing microplastics, there's really no point because it's not on the sea surface. So I think gyre cleanup efforts shouldn't really focus on microplastics. Now you think of the macroplastics. I haven't done 15 expeditions around the world. I've been to a bunch of islands. Every island in the gyre is collecting macroplastics on its windward side. What we're finding is that the debris is washing ashore in huge quantities. Islands are the best nets. I mean, you're not going to invent any contraption, any device that's a more efficient collector of macroplastics than islands in the gyres. And the best part about it is that they're free. Is that you do a beach cleanup on these islands and you'll get more macroplastics than you can carry. And case in point are these oil blobs. I want to point this out because when I was a kid in the 1970s and 80s, you'd walk on the beach and you would step in these oil blobs. Well, in 1978, MARPOL decided, or they passed a law that said big ships can no longer rinse out their hulls, all the excess oil into the ocean. In less than 10 years, the ocean kicked out all these oil blobs. So now they're very infrequent to find these oil blobs on beaches. So the point is that the microplastics aren't where we're looking. Macroplastics wash ashore, and the ocean kicks out this debris. So if we do nothing but prevent plastic going in, you will see a sharp decrease in the plastics remaining in the gyres. Now I want to point out this photograph here. This is one I took 2 months ago in India. I was there working with people on looking at specific products that are most polluting. This is a river north of Delhi where you can see here there are piles of plastic bags in the lower half of the photograph. People in India are the most efficient recyclers. They will tell you what has value, what does not. If it has value, it's not on the ground. There are no bottles, there are no bottle caps. PET is nowhere to be seen on the ground. What you do see are poorly designed products. And in this photograph, in the middle of the photograph, what you see are there are children playing in this little stream using plastic trash to build dams. The people who live here don't care about ocean cleanup. They have other priorities. If you can focus on getting the plastic trash out of their environment, their lives, you will not just save the ocean, you'll be improving this issue long term. You'll see less trash going out to sea, and you improve the lives of the people that matter. So what I would say in summary is that the gyre cleaners, and I get at least one suggestion every month for the last 5 years. There are so many ideas out there. I haven't seen one proven prototype that works. Most gyre cleaners I meet have very little sea time. Most underestimate the costs of their other contraptions and the ecological impacts. And to be honest, there's a mixed message in gyre cleanup. The mixed messaging, let me get rid of this real quick. If you go back to the 1970s, these ads back then, like the Crying Indian ads, the focus was on people causing the problem, and that there was litter, that the litter bug was the source of this problem. The focus today has to be on designing smarter products. And I want to show you what I'm talking about in terms of where gyre cleaners can have the best impact. So this is a fellow that built this device. It is a water wheel that powers a conveyor belt that pulls trash out of rivers. If gyre cleaners, and like Boyan, they're a really intelligent young man who has some amazing engineering capacity, could build a system that could take trash before it gets to the ocean and recover it there, would be extremely useful. Focus on upstream solutions. Focus on better product designs for products that don't get to the ocean in the first place. And focus on the message of prevention over cleanup. That's where I think the focus ought to be. And that ends my presentation.
Excellent. Thanks, Marcus. All right. Now an opening statement from Boyan. Since Marcus took about 7 minutes, you're welcome to take 7 minutes as well, if you'd like.
All right. Thank you. So let's see where to start. Well, also thank you, of course, for inviting me to join this discussion. Let's see. So you know, I started this this project, the Ocean Cleanup, I think about 3 years ago, and of course, and you know, our goal is to develop technologies to extract, prevent, and intercept plastic pollution. So primarily right now we have been focusing on developing this technology to extract plastic pollution from the mid-ocean gyres, basically coming from my frustration of seeing all these concepts but feeling they weren't really thought out and they were very inefficient and they really underestimated the skill of the ocean. I then came up with this passive system, basically powered by the ocean currents, and compared to islands, it's in fact it's sort of really comparable to a real island. It should also be classified as an artificial island. Unfortunately, what we're seeing is that there's been this new study as well by Kara Law this year. Basically, I think it's the best data set ever concerning the micro mesoplastics that can be found in the North Pacific Gyre. What you see is that at where the concentration of plastic pollution is highest, which is about 138 west, 30 degrees north, something like that. It's about 2 orders of magnitude higher than the concentrations around Hawaii, and over there, of course, there's already a lot of trash washing up. But unfortunately, there's no island right there where most of the plastic flux is passing. So what my goal really was with this project is to develop what compares to an island and also doesn't have the disadvantage that plastic washing up on islands isn't completely free, since when you're looking at, for example, ghost nets, they cost up to $25,000 per ton to remove from reefs, and of course, since most of the ecologic activity is also taking place in coastal areas, it will be, I think, it will be better to make sure, in my feeling, a structure would be better than letting the plastic pass through such an area of ecological high activity. That having said, let's go to the next point. Yes, with interest, we have also read the study that Cesar has recently published, and indeed also confirms that there is this sink affecting the very small particles, from a couple of millimeters and down. So I agree that is that is a sink. We've been in touch with the authors as well, and it's a very interesting thing. Fortunately, the system, considering the way it works, is that the ocean current passes underneath these barriers and hence utilizes the difference in flotation force of the particles that are organic and that are polymer, that somewhere with a certain particle size there is this threshold underneath which particles aren't being caught, and that seems to be at around 20 millimeters. That's at least what our best simulation shows. We did another simulation that is closer to a couple of millimeters, but it really sort of picks up where the natural mysterious sink stops working, really. That having said, I mean, it's absolutely certain the ocean cleanup is not the full solution. It's just a part of the solution for the plastics that's currently trapped and is already causing ecologic, health, and economic damage as well. And it's sort of we definitely vowed that in every exposure we always stress the importance of closing the tap first before using this cleaning mop. However, until now, the cleaning mop wasn't even invented yet. So I definitely think that doesn't hurt. Even better, I personally think it could work as an advantage for prevention as well. Because this is such a mediagenic thing, as you have probably seen, we are able to reach many millions of people that have never heard about this problem, or have never even heard about the problem, and that way we also hope to able to raise awareness. And what I see in my personal area is suddenly everyone around me is separating plastics, and I get all these requests from people like saying, we want to help do these microbead bans and plastic bag bans. Could you do like a video message for our council? And we are definitely supportive of such things, because it's not that's not a problem that the ocean cleanup solves. The ocean cleanup solves the problem of plastic being in the oceans and being there for a long time. It doesn't solve the problem on land. That having said, I have seen, of course, some of these technological some of the technological approaches to intercepting plastic before it reaches the ocean as well. And this is something, we definitely do not deny that we won't have any plans to do something like that. In fact, we are already working on some of these ideas, and we hope that in about a year's time we can present something like that to the public as well. But I think this I'll leave it for this for now, and I think this is a good basis to continue the discussion.
Excellent. Thanks, Boyan. All right, now an opening statement from Nick Mallos. Nick, you may take 7 minutes as well if you'd like.
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sure can.
Well, thank you very much, John. And as Marcus said, it's great to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with the other expertise on this panel. First off, I just want to start by saying that I think, Boyan, I think your creativity and ingenuity on this ocean cleanup concept should be applauded. Your cleanup has created quite a buzz, as you said, around the issue of plastic pollution in the ocean, and it's sparked a global dialogue on what the appropriate solutions are. And so Ocean Conservancy, as one of the leaders on this issue for over 30 years of cleanup experience, we're thrilled that people are becoming interested in solving this problem. Unfortunately, we just can't scoop trash out of the ocean, though, or pick it up off the beaches to ultimately solve this issue. And when we talk about cleanups, no one is better positioned to really talk about the efficacy of them than Ocean Conservancy. So for the past 28 years, more than 10 million volunteers have been coming out to pick up trash off our beaches, from our waterways, etc. And on September 20th, in our 29th International Coastal Cleanup, I strongly encourage everyone to do the same. But what we've learned from the 175 million pounds of trash that have been picked up off the beaches is that continuing to rely on this effort is not a solution. Cleanups are a band-aid to this disease, and when in fact what we truly need is a cure. And when we take that cleanup solution from the beach out to the middle of the ocean, we're talking about an even more infeasible solution. Cleaning up on land prevents debris from entering the ocean in the first place, whereas the ocean cleanup is looking to address this issue at the very, very end of this long ocean plastic pollution vector. And addressing this issue at the end of the pipe is not addressing the source. And so to go back to Marcus's point of the Gulf, I think an analog here is thinking about the BP Deepwater Horizon oil spill. We wouldn't have ignored the wellhead that was spewing massive amounts of oil out to instead clean up the oil on the surface. It's vital that we shut off the flow first, otherwise all other efforts are futile. And so I truly hope that in 10 to 20 years we will have been successful at stopping that flow into the plastics of oceans, plastics into the marine environment, at which point I think myself, Marcus, others in the community will champion the idea of an ocean cleanup technology. But in our current plastics climate, where resources are limited and we need more research, we should divert that focus on stopping these materials at their source. And I think also to quote the findings from Kozar et al., showing that focusing only on gyres will only address a minute fraction of the total plastics that are out there. If we take the Kozar and his colleagues' high-end estimates, that means there's roughly 13,000 tons of plastics floating in the North Pacific Ocean. And if we do some back of the envelope calculations and conservatively estimate that maybe 1 to 3% of all plastics produced globally are lost into the marine environment, then that means we could have upwards of 100 million tons of plastics currently floating and sinking and taken up by Arctic ice in the marine environment. So if production continues on this current trajectory, we could very well see an ocean with 1 pound of plastics for every 2 pounds of fish by mid-century. And I don't know about others, but I find that very concerning. So even if we rid the North Pacific Gyre of all plastics with your cleanup technology, what we're talking about is solving essentially 1/10,000th of our ocean problem. That's 0.0001%. So that would be like me going out onto the beach during this year's International Coastal Cleanup, picking up a bottle cap, and calling our work complete. So again, just to reiterate, I truly applaud your effort and the effort of your team and greatly appreciate the interest that has been sparked by these conversations in solving the hugely troubling problem of ocean trash. But ultimately, in order for these types of technologies to make a difference in many years, we need to focus on stopping the pollution at its source. And that means reducing our consumption, eliminating the most damaging items from the marketplace, like Marcus and his colleagues have done in working on the microbead work. And lastly, holding corporations accountable for investing in the necessary solutions. And so, again, thank you all very much, and I look forward to the conversation that ensues.
Excellent. Thanks, Nick. I'm going to have Boyan respond to your last point about COSAR, just because the COSAR study is a really important one for the field, and it's been very much in the news recently. And I want to make sure that we have a chance to discuss that more. Before we do that, I just want to let the audience know that we're going to have an open discussion at this point among the panelists, and I invite the audience to submit, if you wish, any questions or comments for our panelists, and we'll draw from a few of these over the course of the remaining hour. If you're a Google Plus user and are watching this on Google Plus, you can submit your questions in the question box there. Otherwise, you can submit your questions on Twitter using the hashtag MDIChat. MDIChat. So, Boyan, I'll pass it back to you, and then Nick and Marcus can follow up as they wish. But please address the COSAR study a bit more, especially in light of Nick's comment that much of the plastic that we expect to be out there is not in the top surface waters.
Sure. So thank you, Nick, for your comments. First of all, let's see. You mentioned we believe we should first stop the flow. I mean, have you ever heard? I mean, we definitely do not deny that that is something we should first do. So we're completely on the same page. In that field. Then let's see. I think you made a note about 13,000 tons of plastic you mentioned are in the North Pacific Gyre. There was some question I also had about this study, so I contacted COSAR because they actually based their study on the data set of Kara Law as well. So it turns out the difference there between 21,000 tons and 13,000 tons, that was really caused by a different weight they allocated to each particle. But I think it's important to stress that that really is only the small plastics coming from research based by Mentatros. Actually, I'm quite aware of the study Marcus Eriksen will soon publish, and that also includes an estimate based on the large plastics. What we ourselves have estimated based on a sample we took from the Hawaiian shoreline, which is about 0.5 ton, and then allocated extrapolated the mass of that plastics based on some previously published sighting surveys. I believe we came to the conclusion that there's about 150,000 tons of plastic in the North Pacific Gyre. And based on these computational models by Maximenko, by Eric van Sebeer, and by Laurent Lebreton, I'm very sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly, but and we've also collaborated with them on this, and those models really show that we can collect about 42%, or at least the lowest model shows that it's 42. I think the van Sebeer model shows 45% of the surface plastic in the entire North Pacific subtropical gyre can be removed using a single system that's 100 kilometers in length. So I wouldn't call it insignificant. Furthermore, I do have a question as well. Oh, and by the way, regarding the BP oil spill, it's a great analogy, I think, because not only it's clear it was a failure of the tap running, and of course there was a lot of focus on trying to mitigate the flow, but that did not stop BP, which is a corporate interested in profits, basically, of trying to clean something up. Unfortunately, they didn't have our technology, and they were able to collect about 2%, I believe, with $23 billion of total expenses. But it just goes to show that the pollution is still there, and one doesn't exclude the other. In fact, the new study published by the United Nations Environment Programme has a conservative estimate that the cost of plastic pollution in all oceans combined is about $13 billion annually. If you would depreciate the cost of our system, that of course doesn't clean up every last kilo of plastic in the oceans, but depreciated, that's only $45 million per year. And considering the paper of Cesar shows that about a third of all oceanic plastics can be found in the North Pacific, it does goes to show that we can potentially clean up a very large proportion of the surface-based plastic pollution, and hence it definitely also, as long as the stakeholders can be identified, makes commercial sense, since it's likely many times cheaper than the damaged plastic pollution, the direct damage plastic pollution is currently causing. So, and furthermore, we should definitely continue with trying to close the tap. And first of all, we really hope that these are two spin-offs of this project. That furthermore, on one side, the attention this generates makes plastic pollution an even more hot topic, and therefore preventive measures can be more successful. And secondly, that we will definitely develop spin-off technologies for implementation in coastal areas and river deltas to intercept plastic before it reaches the ocean as well. And considering the conditions, mid-ocean conditions are much more extreme than coastal areas, for us it was easier to first start with the difficult thing and then develop spin-offs to implement in these coast areas than the other way around. So I hope that sort of explains the reasoning behind that.
Marcus, would you like to respond?
Sure. I would ask Boyan, if you agree that prevention is key, then why not start there? And perhaps you might say, and I've heard
sorry, couldn't quite catch that.
I'm just making a comment. If you agree that prevention is key, then why not start there? Now, I've heard you in previous presentations you've given that the plastic trash that's in the gyres right now, that it's there. Why not go get it? And the point I was trying to make in my presentation in the beginning was that it's not static. It's not staying there. It's leaving the oceans in huge numbers. The microplastics is very clear. Kozar's paper, my paper, Carol Abdallah's paper, all within the very same ballpark. We estimated a very low number of microplastics. The North Pacific, our estimate from macroplastics is around
Sure.
82,000 tons. So that's a little bit less than your 150,000 tons. But what's in the North Pacific, it's really not just staying in one place. It's washing ashore. The folks on the Big Island of Hawaii, they pull off 20 metric tons a year in a beach cleanup in Camilo Beach. It's coming ashore. It's disappearing. I don't see the big need to put this giant machine in the North Pacific when it's coming ashore all the time. If we can focus on prevention, we will have long-term lasting solutions. If we focus there, and that's the hard road. It's hard to work with companies and find a good central place where we can meet and say, okay, this solution works for all of us, let's do this. That's difficult, it's a hard road, but it works. It has long-term, lasting, positive impacts on the oceans and the people who are impacted by this trash. And that's the point that I've been trying to make.
Boyan, do you have a comment in response?
Yeah, so I think two things there. First of all, as previously mentioned, I don't think there's any reason to believe this should be, or this would act as some sort of distraction. As I already mentioned, I think the exposure it generates actually can assist with these preventive measures, and I think actually quite recently the head of the United Nations Environment Program, Achim Steiner, he has acknowledged us, and he shares our opinion that it's perhaps in the long term, the attention this creates, perhaps it will prevent more tons of plastic reaching the oceans than we would eventually catch. But that having said, I don't think there is, although we do know there are, of course, tons of plastic beaching there. When you look at the oceanographic models predicting the paths of plastic pollution, I'm not sure. Of course, it's a moving system. That's basically how our system works. It's really based on the plastic moving around. But it's definitely the Gyre does appear to be a sink. It may not be the ultimate sink, but it's definitely an interstage that appears to be there for a long while. I believe when we met in California in February last year, or this year, you mentioned this anecdotal evidence that we were discussing the comment that was in this article of your colleague, Mr. Wilson, about that every year or every rotation of the Gyre, so that would be about 5 years, about a third of the plastics within the North Pacific Gyre escapes the Gyre, so either get beached or transported to another Gyre. But I believe you then mentioned that quite recently inside an albatross they found a bit of plastic with a serial number on that related to a World War II fighter plane. So if you're perhaps be interested in highlighting that, but my point is that I don't think we can for certain say, and I personally think it's not the case that all the large plastics have a short interval time of being inside this North Pacific Gyre.
I have a question for Nick. It seems that we're all in agreement that prevention is key, that we need to shut off the tap.
Of course.
We seem to also be in some agreement that something similar to the Baltimore solution, with collecting debris upstream, is also a very good idea, keeping it from getting out into the oceans. How far off the coast are you willing to go with cleanup and still see that it serves a purpose and is feasible, or is it pretty much right hugged up against a river mouth as far out as you're willing to go?
I mean, I haven't run the estimates and the economics of it, so I won't quote on the exacts. But what I can say is, I mean, cleaning up debris from beaches and from rivers, and as the Baltimore trash wheel shows, I mean, these are costly endeavors, but they are still far less costly than once you move into the marine environment, where you're talking about the usage of vessels, the usage of moorings, and other forms of highly expensive, highly variable equipment that is exposed to the dynamic environmental conditions and uncertain variables that are in the marine environment. And so, you know, I think cleanup at the end of the day, as I've said, it's a Band-Aid. And I think the river scenarios, the river technologies that are capturing this debris before it enters the marine environment in terms of a mechanical cleanup technology, I think is the best option we have at this point. But I would like to pose a question to Boyan in terms of this cleanup piece and in terms of the oscillations. You know, I certainly don't think what Marcus was saying, and I don't want to speak for you, Marcus, but we're clearly not saying that every piece of plastic that is in the gyre gets spit out within, you know, a 1 to 3 year period. Certainly there are those pieces of legacy plastics that have been there for years. But, you know, in your summary, you propose that your cleanup technology can likely clean the North Pacific gyre, you know, somewhere between the 5 to 10 year period. And my question is, how do you account for the fact that we are seeing rapid increases in global productions of plastics? We're seeing rapid increases in the usage of these single-use disposable plastics in many of the industrializing nations around the world where populations are drastically increasing. And as I think Marcus showed with his images, in many of these places where this consumption is going through the roof, there is no basic management infrastructure to actually handle these plastics. So I recognize that even if all the parameters you set forth in your technology can indeed capture the plastics, how do you account for the fact that we are going to have massive influxes of plastics into our global ocean, not just tomorrow, not just the next week, but for years to come?
Okay, so a very good point. Actually, on one side, so the technical side, we have run two different calculations in terms of the amount of plastic we would collect. One is the perfect world scenario where no more plastic is entering the oceans, and the second one is the one where the influx of plastic follows an exponential path as has been built in the Labraton model. And what it shows is that irrespective of either scenario, still 42% of the plastic within this, or approximately 42% I should say, within this North Pacific subtropical gyre would be collected. So only the question is 42% of what? If more plastic would enter the oceans, you know, the truth is, and the awful thing is, that the cost per kilo to remove the plastic would actually be lower in that case. So then, and you know, and then of course, well, we do see that the production of disposable plastics is still increasing, but to me that seems like we are sort of failing, or you know, we are not successful enough, would be a better way of putting it, of trying to prevent plastic pollution. And that's why I think sort of this new wave of attention, new way of looking at the problem from a technological side. So that would be, first of all, better product design. Secondly, intercepting plastic that still is able to escape the chain. And then thirdly, the plastic that's already out there, you know, eventually we should clean that up. I mean, chronologically, we're definitely on the same page. The difference is that you know, we are perhaps you know, and that perhaps doesn't make us popular with you know, some NGOs, is that we start off with the extraction side and we do not start with the prevention side. But that's not the chronological way of doing it. Of course, the tap should first close, and after that only we should look at the cleanup. But it doesn't. I mean, it shouldn't inhibit us of first, trying to develop this technology. There's one other question I would like to ask you, Nick, and it was also a figure that was quoted by, I think it was the CEO of the Ocean Conservancy, and that was that somewhere in 2020 there would be something like half or a comparable weight of plastic to fish in the ocean or something like that. And also what you mentioned is a conservative estimate of 1 to 3% of the produced plastic entering the oceans. Personally, I've never seen any sources for this. So, I mean, if there are sources for that, I would really be interested in reading about that.
Sure, and I can tell you, as I said, conservative estimate. I mean, if we go to some of these places that Marcus has talked about, these island nations, you can see the flux of plastics flowing into the marine environment. So certainly, what I'm saying here is that this is a back of the envelope calculation of 1 to 3% of global plastics productions gives you roughly these numbers. And if we follow those trajectories over the next 20 to 30 years, what we'll see is that the 800 million tons of biomass of finfish in the ocean, we see a plastics number that roughly equals half of that amount. So again, that is calculations that Ocean Conservancy have made based on our knowledge, our understanding of the issue, and our estimates of what could in fact be the scenario out there.
Okay. Sure. That does, I think, lead up to the question, especially since Nick, of course, you are also working on sort of a end of the chain solution of cleaning up beaches. Is really do you feel cleaning up and at all hurts preventive measures in a way, and how does beach cleanup differ from ocean cleanup? Besides, of course, the economics and the feasibility, which apparently we differ in views. But besides those two factors, wouldn't the idea of people actually involving in cleaning up also give this message that we shouldn't work on cleanup, which we know is not the case with the ocean cleanup, because we always stress that it should be first close. So I wonder how that works.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak on that, and I think you're exactly right. I mean, I think Ocean Conservancy would love to celebrate next year when everyone comes out on the beach and there's actually no cleanup or there's no debris to clean up, and we wouldn't effectively need to have an international coastal cleanup in years to come. But the reality is these items are finding their way onto the beach, and what we know is that if we are removing these items from the beach, they cannot make their way into the marine environment. So we are addressing this issue. Yes, it is not at the fire hose. It is not upstream where these items are being made, but it is also not at the end of that plastic pollution vector. We are cutting those items off somewhere in the middle there that prevents them from entering the marine environment, either on the beach, whether it's into the rivers and into the waterways, so that those items do not end up out in the middle of the gyres and do not end up adding to the massive amounts of quantities of plastics that are already out there. So I think Ocean Conservancy would be the first to say that if we could eliminate the need for a cleanup, it would be a true success of this issue. But until that day comes, I mean, removing items from beaches is a way of preventing these items from entering the beach or entering the marine environment in their first place. So I think it's a great question, but I stand firm that I think not only does it get items off the beach, it engages the public, and it provides us information to then go and document what are the most persistent items that are finding their way into the marine environment, and that creates a dialogue that is based on data that we can then go and engage stakeholders in industry that have a stake in this game as well.
Okay, but would a cleanup that happens to take place in the middle of the oceans not create any data. I think in this placing this device would probably be the ultimate way of knowing how much plastic there is in the oceans. Furthermore, the massive amount of attention it creates, I mean, it's probably also the ultimate way of showing people that there is a tremendous amount of plastic in the oceans. And thirdly, if you see beaches as also, the sort of an intermediate type of prevention thing, what we are really looking at is that the large plastics, apart from stuff like entanglement, really the problem where it starts creating a problem is when they break down into microplastics and enter food chains, or that's the most dominant problem. So by catching the larger plastics, wouldn't that classify as some sort of prevention thing as well, saying that since we personally estimate that about 80% of the plastics is large plastics, some people estimate it being even more, that you sort of prevent this microplastic ingestion from happening by also catching this large plastic.
I mean, I think there's an argument there, but at the same time, we're talking about the North Pacific gyre, which is a subtropical ecosystem that is largely oligotrophic, and there are certainly organisms that live there, but compared to more upwelling systems and coastal shelf systems, where the majority of our marine biota live, you're talking about cleaning up an environment that is probably among the least dense of organisms in the ocean. And again, I don't want to say that it's not an important ecosystem, but by cleaning up the ocean, you are preventing some of that exposure, to those organisms. But you have these items traversing coastal environments where we see the majority of, sea turtle species and fishes and marine mammals and seabirds foraging and taking uptaking these marine plastics. So by cleaning up the middle of the oceans, yes, you would eliminate some of that exposure, but you're not eliminating the major pathway of exposure for these marine organisms.
But when, as Marcus states, there is some of this plastic, that it does eventually beach. I wouldn't dare putting a figure to that, but we do know that a percentage of that does beach. By doing this offshore ocean cleanup deployment, wouldn't you also prevent the plastic from having to pass through this this most ecologically valuable area of the ocean?
I mean, perhaps you're eliminating the return trip, but obviously it has to get out to the gyre in one way, and so you're not eliminating the exposure in its large form when it is exposed to a variety of these animals. And boy, and I'm certainly not arguing that there is not merit to the ocean cleanup concept. I certainly am not saying that there is not some value in removing plastics from the North Pacific gyre. I think the point that I am making here, and I think others have articulated, is that when we look at the resources that are out there and the priorities of how we address this issue, we have to look at stopping these items at their source and preventing them from reaching there. And so, we talk about the river mouths and these primary entry points of plastics into the marine environment. I would pose, how many of those Baltimore water wheels could you employ in some of the most polluted rivers on Earth with the $2 million that it would cost for this prototype? So I think there are, again, I don't want the focus to be that the ocean cleanup is not a good concept. It is not a solution that could effectively remove plastics from the marine environment. But when we look at the timeline of priority to address this issue and make meaningful impact, I just don't think the time is now.
I want to bring Marcus back in too. Do you have anything to say, Marcus?
Yeah, I guess from what I'm hearing in this conversation is there's a sharp disagreement whether plastic stays in the North Pacific gyre or it goes. Is it being exported from the accumulation zone? And I would really say that it's not as static as I think Boyan assumes that it is. So our estimates for our global amount of trash in the oceans, macroplastics and micro combined, is 250,000 metric tons. That's less than 0.2% of 2012's global production of plastics worldwide. So it is going in, a lot is going in, but a lot is going out. It's not static, it's not staying there. And if you give it 5 or 10 years on its own, with prevention being hyper efficient, it would largely be exported onto beaches. So I really think there's a disagreement, a misunderstanding between us with regards to how much is there and how static this system is in the North Pacific subtropical gyre. The other point that I heard you making was about post-consumer distraction. If what the Ocean Conservancy does to close the cleanup, and what you propose to do, Boyan, if that takes us away from some of the efforts to do prevention, and I would say to some degree it does. It is a mixed message that we are often telling the consumer that the focus is on human behavior rather than product design, or it's on litter versus pollution. I think if we can go back to prevention, and if you really agree that prevention is key, that's got to be the bigger part of your message, instead of rerouting people to ocean cleanup being your primary message. Now, I'd say the same for Ocean Conservancy also. I'm not sure where you guys are in terms of focusing on the products. You do a good job identifying them, like plastic bags being 11% of what you're finding on beaches worldwide. That at least points out what the products are. But I'd ask both of you guys, where do you want to see the prevention measures start? Are you willing to work on those top 10 products that are the most polluting worldwide, that have no recovery system in place? Will you work to get those out of the waste stream?
Nick, your response?
Yeah, I think Marcus makes a good point. You know, we have been highlighting these items over the past years and decades, and I do agree that there are some products like plastic bags that we have seen that there are viable alternatives, and we do not need these items in the marketplace. However, if we come at this and think that we are going to ban or eliminate our way out of this from a product by products perspective, we're not going to be left with anything to use. And I think we do have to accept to a certain extent that there are some plastics that are going to remain in our lives for years to come. And so where Ocean Conservancy is focused right now is starting to think about how do we engage corporations and other leaders and think about how we get some of these basic waste management needs in the places that need it most, so that we can stop and turn off the faucet and stop some of these massive influxes of plastics and other forms of debris into the marine environment. And so I would love to continue this conversation. I see we're running out of time, but absolutely just talking about the items that are on the beaches is not enough. We need to be proactive. We need to engage corporations and industry and the makers of these products, because it is not about the individual alone. You know, we have a certain extent, we have purchasing power, and we can talk about the items and reduce our consumption of them. But at the end of the day, we need to make sure the capacity is there to deal with these items in a responsible manner, and that the producers of these products are responsible as well.
I have a question for Marcus and Nick. Getting back to kind of the genesis of this whole discussion, bringing you guys together, the chasm between where the general public is, they seem to really support ocean cleanup, cleaning up the mess that humans have made, and where the marine debris community is, which is, generally not favoring cleanup, thinking that it's not particularly feasible. How do you guys respond? Marcus, you mentioned at the beginning that you are regularly presented with ideas for ocean cleanup. How do you respond when people come up to you saying we need to clean up the oceans? And do you think that it's kind of an awkward position for the marine debris community to be in? Can the marine debris community handle this disconnect in a way to move the field forward and harness this groundswell of enthusiasm that Boyan has unearthed with his project, with raising $1 million from something like 23,000 backers in the last month? How can the marine debris community take advantage of that interest and harness it in a productive way that you guys would feel comfortable with?
So how I would see like an equal split between post-consumer cleanup and get a model that works, do your prototype and test it, make sure it works first, but the other half of your funding, go to some preventive measures in rivers, or even identify the products and help with the work legislation to push a transition from phasing out bad products to bringing in the new innovative ones. I think that has to happen. But this whole issue of the public, the knee-jerk reaction, go clean up the gyres, I think it's blowback from that old idea of Texas-sized garbage patches. The first reaction is, well, go get it, go clean it up. I think as a marine debris community, we have to unravel that mythology, that there are no islands, it's globally distributed. The microplastics have this insidious life cycle going through marine ecosystems. The focus has to be on prevention, on the top-tier products that are polluting the world's oceans.
Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't disagree with Marcus at all. I think far too often, not only in the marine debris community, but in the larger environmental conservation community, there are we fight amongst ourselves and we disagree amongst ourselves. So I agree that, coming at this issue and trying to say, well, actually, ocean cleanups aren't the solution, is very knee-jerk to many people that are just starting to hear about this concept for the first time. So the more we can focus and start dispelling those myths, as Marcus has discussed, these twice the size islands of trash that are twice the size of Texas islands of trash, is very important. And so I do think that we need to get better about having cohesive messaging, thinking about what the priorities are for in addressing this issue, and come at it as a more aligned and unified kind of conservation community. And John, because we're almost out of time, the one thing I think is important to emphasize that we haven't really talked about much during this hangout is kind of just the feasibility and design parameters. And so I certainly am not an engineer, but I would encourage people to read the kind of reaction to the feasibility study put out by the people at Deep Sea News, that really lays out some of the just technical challenges that were articulated even in the feasibility study, and some numbers that don't add up, some real gaps in understanding and knowledge that still remain. So while there is a larger theoretical conversation that needs to take place here, there are also some very big questions that remain about whether or not something like this could even survive out in the middle of the North Pacific Gyre.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up, Nick. Actually, one of the top questions that people have submitted and voted on as part of this hangout has to do with that technical review by Miriam Goldstein and Kim Martini, and I do want to give Boyan a chance to address that briefly, how he anticipates working on the critical points from that technical review before or while proceeding with his rollout. Boyan?
Sure. I think just getting back to what Marcus previously said about also allocating some of our attention to river interception and prevention. I mean, thank you for exactly pointing at what our plan is. However, I'm wondering if when we are developing something to intercept plastic in rivers, if that's not seen as sort of an end of the pipe solution that hypothetically gives people the incentive to continue polluting, because these machines that are in all the rivers of the world, they simply will catch the trash we're throwing on the street. So I mean, we always stress that is not something that should happen. Furthermore, we always, when we have the chance to, we always stress that there is no island of trash. That is exactly the reason why I started out with this problem, because people are overestimating the density of this. However, as some recent studies show, there is actually the concentration within these gyres are significantly higher, I mean many orders of magnitude higher than the plastic, or the concentration of plastics that are outside of these boundaries is a wrong word to use here, but outside of these giants. So it's definitely not that we are misunderstanding what the problem is here. I mean, we are basing the mass estimates on the most recent publications, and that really doesn't influence the results in any way. Well then, getting to the question about the new article that has been posted on Deep Sea News. We are very happy that Miriam Goldstein and Kim Martini took the time for actually reading it. I mean, I'm glad at least someone has read it by now. That's we're really happy about that. However, Nick, you mentioned you're not an engineer. Miss Martini and Miss Goldstein are also no engineers. They're oceanographers. So the points in terms of oceanography about some details about the binning of the vertical distribution results. Right now we're working on a version 1.2 of the report. These are issues we are really glad someone points them out, because as in the article it was stated, right now we are unaware of anyone having done the full, having reviewed the report as a full. That's obvious, because no one is an oceanographer or a physical oceanographer and a biological oceanographer and an engineer and a maritime law expert, so neither are they. But that's not really the point I want to make here, because we are still very happy that they pointed out lots of valid points, but I would just like to highlight 4 of them that have been recently quoted by the magazine Popular Science. So first of all, an overarching use of average rather than extreme current speeds to estimate the operational limits in the design process. Well, we are really happy at least someone pointed this out, because the team of 70 engineers and oceanographers and other experts that have worked on this study, they didn't find that mistake. So we used a 15 centimeter per second value in the engineering part. That is average, not extreme. However, these floating barriers, they are designed to have an operational limit that is 95% of the time. So after that, they would be semi-decoupled by a quick release pin. That way, the dynamic forces acting on them will be reduced and will keep them in one piece. But that having said, the 15 centimeter per second isn't the 95% value. So yesterday when I read that, I did some quick back of the envelope calculations using the drag formula, and what it would do, it would increase the force by about 800 newtons per meter. And now I'm talking about the extreme value, which we do not really have to engineer for, because we are engineering for this 95% operational limit. But we, I still did this calculation, so it would increase that. And considering we have utilized a safety factor of 2.5 to 3 in both the moorings and the floating barriers, this increase of, I believe it's something like 30% of the forces. It's it's an awful mistake we've done there, but fortunately it doesn't influence the final conclusion that it is indeed likely a feasible and financially viable method to clean this up. Okay, so then the second point, in terms of the biofouling, there was, I think, in the article it was mentioned that we say, well, biocidal anti-fouling can last up to 5 years, but the system is being deployed for 10 years. Well, that's certainly correct, but if you may have checked out chapter, I think it's 10.4, there is this table of all the cost estimates, and over there you see that after 5 years, the limited lifetime of those floating barriers has been set to 5 years, as well as the operational costs it would take to install those. So we haven't calculated costs for cleaning them, but we have been even more conservative by simply saying after 5 years we just take into account the costs of entirely decommissioning those floating barriers and installing new ones. So that is sort of covered. However, the question is, does biofouling really affect the workings of the system? Because of course, even with those coatings, you would significantly reduce the amount of fouling, as can be seen by the link provided about these underwater drones that can be seen in her article. But it doesn't exclude all biofouling. So first of all, there are two effects. There's the weighing down of the structure, and then there is the fluid dynamic influences. So in terms of the weight, the buoyancy force, the excess buoyancy force for these floating barriers to work is around 800 kilos per meter of floating barrier. So that would mean, of course, you have the displacement caused by these mollusks and other fouling organisms. So this really means you would need layers of many meters in thickness to create this 800 kilos of plastic of biofouling per meter. So we don't think that is very likely. Secondly, there is the fluid dynamics potential issue. However, since we have observed in laboratory tests, and these are these moments that you really wish the preliminary tests had been included in the feasibility study report as well, but we hadn't because we thought they were insignificant. But looking back at them, we will certainly include them again in the new version of the report. But that really shows that the plastic sort of concentrates within several meters, up to tens of meters of these floating barriers. So it isn't like the plastic is moving along these barriers, like physically touching it. So that's really a misunderstanding of how these how the fluid dynamics works, and hence we personally don't think it influences it, but the goal of these pilot tests is also to scale up and to validate some of the remaining assumptions, because that's also an important thing. A feasibility study, successful feasibility study, and they're being done on new concepts all the time by also the market-leading engineering companies we've worked with, and it doesn't mean there's a 100% guarantee it can be done. The only moment we are certain it can be done is after having done it, and since this is something nobody has ever done, there's absolutely no guarantee that it can be done. But based on the research we have been able to do, considering the time, the budget, and the fact that we haven't done it on a full scale so far, means that to the best of our knowledge, it is indeed likely feasible and viable. Sorry, I do know we are running out of time here, but I'll just look at the third point. So that's the plastic pollution at depth. So we did this new research in terms of the vertical distribution of plastics. I have seen in a recent blog post by Gyres that Marcus, you're also looking into this. In fact, I know this for quite a while because we have been sharing some troll designs in the past, and we also made sure that the opening width of these nets are equal so that our data is comparable. So I hope that worked out and that your troll worked out as well in your recent expedition. But really, we do not conclude that all or the majority of plastics is within the top 3 meters, because as correctly pointed out, then you would need to know a lot more concentrations at depths greater than 5 meters. But what it does go to show is that most of the plastic can be found in the top layer. And you can also argue that why are we doing this research at all besides trying to add some leaves to the tree of knowledge, because the particles we have caught below, say, 0.5 meter never exceeded the size of 2 centimeters that appears to be the bottom limit of the particle size we're trying to catch. So at least for, since at least 80%, or we estimate that it's about 80% of the plastic that is larger than that, it really does make sense to focus on the surface and not try to go deeper into the water column, because really linearly the forces would just continue to increase. So then there is the no substantial plans on how to address environmental issues snaring unwanted critters. So really, because this current is flowing underneath it, you know, unfortunately, I'm personally not an ecologist, so we really had to trust on the expert advice of the people we have then approached to look at that chapter, the oceanographers, and you know, they did agree with what was written over there. As can be read, I also tried to consult Miriam Goldstein in this process, but she mentioned she was, oh no, she wasn't a biological oceanographer. So, but unfortunately, you know, we were really running out of time back then in the feasibility study. But so apparently there are some taxa of organisms that we mentioned that cannot be found in the North Pacific gyre, and you know, this is something we will also look at trying to improve with version 2.0. However, since almost all organisms in the subtropical North Pacific subtropical gyre are neutrally buoyant, they will likely get taken away by the ocean current and hence do not accumulate, while the plastic, which is positively buoyant, does. And since we do not use nets, because nets are, you know, they have been used with all these previous concepts, and you know, they would definitely pose a risk to organisms. Our concept does not use nets. It uses solid barriers, non-permeable. So entanglement is, you know, apart from the mooring cable, which is basically just a rope. So you know, no entanglement possibilities there either. So you know, we do not think that poses a problem. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So Boyan, your device capturing surface plastics. There are a lot of organisms that are just free floating, like Velella, the by-the-wind sailors. There are floating barnacles that will have a little floating mass that they stem from. Halobades. There are a lot of floating organisms that as far as I see, will be captured by your device and likely outweigh the plastics that you anticipate collecting.
Well, let's see. This is actually the reason that we do not have any plans to deploy this in the North Atlantic, because due to the sargassum.
Pacific only.
Yeah, I mean, there is. We have done while doing these expeditions, we have looked at the rising speed of this sargassum, and it is too high for the system to just pass underneath it. So you know, that wouldn't be a good idea. We also looked at, you know, some marine scientists asked about fish larvae and fish eggs. So I recently looked at some studies myself, because unfortunately our head of ecology is currently unavailable, and apparently these the sizes are mostly between 1 and 5 millimeters, and their density is about 1.02 to 1.01, which is far outside of the range our computational fluid dynamics simulations project will capture. So, I mean, if there are any other examples of taxa you think would be a concern, I mean, please let us know. And
yeah, that's what I was saying. If I can interject, so in the North Pacific, you have the little floating jellies called by-the-wind sailors, and they're there by the billions. They're everywhere, as well as
like Portuguese man o' wars, or
if you look it up, it's Velella. Velella is the species. They float on the surface, have a sail similar to Portuguese man o' war, but different. Then you have these little floating masses with lepas, gooseneck barnacles coming off of those, right at the surface. Halobades and other critters in the North Pacific that I'm guessing are going to outweigh and outnumber the plastics you anticipate collecting. So, and these are bigger than the larvae sizes that you're saying will not be affected.
Well, I mean, I'm not aware, of the specific density of these particles, nor am I aware of their size and their abundance. So I will certainly ask this to our ecologists and about these Newston communities. And when we have the answer, we will certainly share it with you.
All right, we're quite a bit over time, and I'm sensitive to the time of all three of you, and we may have lost Nick. Maybe he'll pop back on, but we have enough questions here to keep going for probably another couple hours, and I thank the audience for sending in the questions. I'll share the questions with the panel afterwards, and we'll see if we can get answers to them in coming days. If you guys are willing to spend a little bit of time on that, that would be very generous. But Marcus, Boyan has been discussing his system for the last few minutes. I want to give you a chance to provide your thoughts on what he has said, or your thoughts in general on what we've covered over the last hour and 18 minutes.
I think I'm not really trying to discourage Boyan as much as redirect. And it's not just Boyan, it's all the gyre cleaners out there. And I get these comments a lot from people, and they often are knee-jerk reactions from really smart people, great engineers with little sea time, that have these amazing prototypes that are really untested. Now I just tell Boyan, make a small model and throw it out there, see what happens. I know you've done tests on booms and in laboratory tests. Make a model, throw it out there, and get to the Pacific. I know you've done the North Atlantic. You were on the Sea Dragon, a boat that I've been on quite a bit. Get to the Pacific and see what's living out there. Spend some time out there.
Right. So, I mean, I wish I had the opportunity to join more of these expeditions. We've done 3 so far, I think, and on only one I was able to join myself, unfortunately due to time constraints. But I'd be happy to go on an expedition like that once, or more than that. But we will certainly do many tests in the Pacific as well. However, I must point out that we have actually deployed a scale model test in the near the Azores. It was about 40 meters in length, and we weren't too lucky because the weather was really good. So we weren't able to do any measurements on the forces, but fortunately the software and some laboratory tests have been able to show that. Oh, and there was another point in the article by Mrs. Martini and Goldstein. It mentioned that we first quantified these forces on the floating barriers using this Orcaflex software on sort of a generic type of floating barrier, and then came up with an entirely new boom design, which we also patented because we think there are more applications to it. And this new floating barrier, we then of course knew there was this a compatibility problem with the force simulations we've done before that. And now ideally we would have repeated the whole 4-month simulation process again, but since we didn't have the time for that, we decided to go to a pool, and we built a wave generator, and we simulated the current by pulling.
That's not going to work. Boyan, that's not going to work. You've got to make a prototype, put it in the ocean, a smaller one, let it sit there for a year or so, and just see what it does. You've got to have that.
I mean, that's not the systematic process we have tried to pursue. This very small scale thing we have deployed in the pool and in with the waves. It really showed that the new developed barrier that absorbs the forces much more efficiently than a sort of a generic boom, and hence when we mentioned there's the safety factor of 2.5 to 3, that is still too conservative, because we were able to quantify, and we will also include these results in the next version of the feasibility study, that the forces are 60% lower than what we have calculated. And of course, that's exactly what our plan is. The reason we are raising funds and we're starting these new collaborations is really to scale this up and deploy it in the oceans, and to really bridge this gap from 40 meters to the 100 kilometers we want to deploy it in the third phase. So really, thank you for pointing out really the main goal of the second phase. Besides that, there is quite some in-depth engineering and oceanographic research that still has to be done. There's some major variables influencing the efficiency and cost efficiency of the system that are important for funders to know when we want to prepare for this third phase. So if we have discussed collaboration before, we are always open to collaborate, since I think we are certainly on the same page, both in terms of our philosophy about prevention first, and about our goals to increase the knowledge there is of plastic pollution in the Gyres. So I mean, we have discussed this before, and I would happy to accept your offer, and I think there are quite some synergies there, but.
Well, if I can make one suggestion, this comes from a few people who've talked about alternatives to gyre cleanup, and it's a way to incentivize post-consumer recovery. And as I'm sure you would agree, if you incentivize recovery, you get this stuff back. That's what bottle redemption programs work. And I want to go back to this one program that was called the Ghost Net Network. I think it was a NOAA program, and they incentivize recovery for ghost nets. And I'm wondering, I mean, would you consider this challenge? If you raised $2 million, take 5% of that and create a budget to incentivize recovery of big trash in the North Pacific Gyre. You've got a big fishing community. If you gave them, let's say, $1 per kilo for trash they can bring out from the sea, when they're out there already, to bring back trash $1 a kilo. If that works, it would beat your $6 per kilo estimate for gyre cleanup. Would you consider, as just a test run, to take 5% of the total you raise and see if that works more efficiently?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it would be a wise thing to take that off the crowdfunding budgets, considering we do need this in order to develop this. Even though thanks to these collaborations with 4 minutes with these offshore companies and institutes to really make these costs as low as possible. But I'm really all up for incentives to also really pay ships to deposit their garbage once they enter harbors, and when we have the opportunity to highlight these things with politicians and companies that are involved in these processes. I mean, we always suggest something like that, because I think I'll think about it. I'll get back to that.
Would you do that? It's a very small percentage. And I mean, if the goal is it to build a device, make it work, or to get plastic out of the North Pacific Gyre? If the latter is the case, I think a small percentage to incentivize recovery, it might be very effective and could work better. I mean, what you don't want to do is back yourself into a corner with one idea. I mean, if there are multiple ideas that could work, see which one works best.
All right, I'm going to cut
It
off
would
the
be,
conversation
well,
there.
it's an
I
interesting
apologize.
idea, Marcus.
I agree.
We'll look into it, and it's actually we we may. I mean, just check out our Facebook page if we will soon announce something like that. It's an interesting idea. Let's leave it to that.
All right. Thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Boyan. And thanks to Nick, and thank you to the audience for sticking with us and contributing your questions, most of which we did not have time to get to, unfortunately. But like I said, I'll share them with the panel, and we'll see if we can get some answers in some way to them, and we'll publicize them on MarineDebris.Info. Also, let us know in the question area or on Twitter, was this useful to you? How could future panel discussions be improved? What topics would you like to see covered? We are very open to your ideas and look forward to them. Recording of this discussion will be available in a few minutes on the MarineDebris.Info website. I know that everybody needs to get going now, and I'll let you go. And thank you again for this. I think it was very informative. I learned a few new things over the course of the last hour and a half, and I hope everyone else did too. All right, we will end the chat.
Thank you for
Marcus.
the email,
Thank
Mark.
you, Boyan.
Oh, no, thank you for organizing this.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Boyan.